Hi, everybody. My name is Nanika Edwards, and I am a creative from Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean. I'm a poet, I'm an artist, I'm a poet, author, artist. I wear many different hats, and it's actually the wee hours of the morning right now, 4:25 a.m. to be exact, on the 18th of July, 2024. And well, in this video, I'd like to quickly, very quickly, as quickly as I can, share some common misconceptions about creativity. And I think I'm definitely qualified to speak about these things because I am a creative and I've had the opportunity to chat with different people and hear the different things that people say about creativity. And I know that there are a lot of misconceptions out there. So let's get into it. I've got 10 different misconceptions and also the counterpoint, the counterpoints to those misconceptions. Okay, so let's go. Number one, I need drugs to be creative. The actual reality is to be creative, we need to have a sober mind. We don't need drugs. Drugs can seem like they can seem like creativity enhancers, but at the end of the day, they do not benefit us psychologically or neurologically. As a matter of fact, and when I say drugs, I mean like marijuana or cocaine, heroin, that kind of thing, those kinds of things. And at the end of the day, what they can do is so affect the physical structure of your brain that you cannot use your literal brain in an optimal kind of way. So, no, drugs do not enhance creativity. You need a sober mind to be truly creative. Number two, I need to be weird to be creative. When we think of creative people, we think of these hippies and these strange people wearing headbands tied to the side and saying all kinds of unusual and odd things. That's what we think of as creatives, right? Now, I must admit, when it comes to fashion, I am somewhat on the bohemian side, but I'm actually a very regular, normal person, and I'm very creative, right? You don't have to be weird to be creative. To be creative, you really need to be practical and sensible because creativity calls for a lot of dot connecting and also problem solving. So, to be creative, you do have to be practical and sensible. I need to have a mental illness or to be kind of a bit of a lunatic. Okay, some people may not like that word, but I may have to have, people may need to question my lunacy if I'm to be called creative. The truth is that sanity and soundness of mind are what are really needed to be creative. Now, I can tell you from experience that when the chemicals in my brain are not doing what they're supposed to do, and I'm creative, the creativity that comes out of that tends to be, I mean, yes, it can be creative, but it's honestly not as creative as the creativity that comes out of me when I am perfectly sound and when my mind is working in the way that it's supposed to work. There's a vast difference. And most times, um, I do have mental challenges that I have to manage, but I usually have them under control. And when I am fully well within, how to put it, when I am fully whole and together, that's when I produce my best work. So I can tell you from experience, maybe having a mental illness or having a mental challenge does, I don't know, enhance creativity in some way that maybe even science doesn't fully understand right now. But by the same token, I would definitely say that being of a sound mind and having your brain functioning the way it's supposed to function produces the best quality, the best kind of creativity. And by the way, you can look at God as an example. God is not a lunatic. God is well within, his he is always of right and sound mind. And look at the vast and beautiful universe that he has created. I mean, have you ever looked at those astronomy images of um galactic systems and star systems and constellations? I mean, they're absolutely mind blowing. And that came from the heart and mind of a divine being who's always of sound mind. Like he's not a lunatic, right? So I think that alone proves my point. Some people think that they need to have sparks of inspiration to be creative. Like I've heard a lot of people say, especially people who, for example, may be interested in writing poetry, they would say, I just don't feel inspired. I have to wait to be inspired to write something. No, you don't have to wait to be inspired. The honest truth is that you can literally sit down and deliberately plan something that is creative, and that will still make you truly creative. You do not have to wait for sparks of inspiration. If you wait for sparks of inspiration, you might be waiting a very long time or you might be waiting forever. You have to take a hold of your creative process and you have to direct it sometimes. And yes, there is space for sparks of inspiration. I know I have experiences like that sometimes where God speaks to me and will put certain thoughts in my heart that I wouldn't have thought of myself on my own. But that is not the norm for me. That would be more of an anomaly. Typically, I would decide, you know what, I want to write about this particular topic. I want to cover these particular points. And you can if you're a poet, you can literally plan out your poem like you would an essay when you were in school, right? So you do not have to wait for sparks of inspiration. And in fact, I would very strongly discourage you from doing that. Number five, I need to have genius level gifting to be creative. No, you don't. You don't. A person of average intelligence who has developed some degree of competency in a particular area can be creative. You just need average intelligence plus some decent degree of competence in some particular area, and you can be creative. As a matter of fact, you may find that if you start at what may be called a lower level of creativity and gradually build up through practice, you may find that you may have some type of genius gifting. But most times, genius, at least in my experience, it doesn't just appear poof like magic. You really just have to build a skill, and the more reflexive your muscularity becomes in that skill, is the more you would kind of start veering towards, I don't know if veering is the right word, but you find that maybe you would start expressing certain sparks of genius, or you may discover that you're a genius, or you may discover that you're just average, you're just normal, you're just on the average mean, which is fine. The important thing is to just be creative, because in being creative, you're going to find fulfillment, whether that's as an average person, as a genius, as a whatever. Just enjoy being creative. I know as human beings, we always want to be top of the hill and king of the hill because we are competitive by nature. But why? You want to be king of the hill so you can have bragging rights? That's not a good reason to want to be a genius or an intellectual giant. No, be just be satisfied with what you have. Apply the talent, invest the talent that God has invested in you, and you're going to find that you will grow in competence and skill and gifting. Okay, number six, I need to have artistic gifting to be creative. That's not true. You can have competence in any field and be creative. You could be an architect. You could be in the pharmaceutical industry. You could be a mathematician. You could be a scientist, a biologist. You could be anything, a chemist, and you can be creative, right? So creativity is not just for the arts, although I think typically creativity is most broadly expressed within the arts and maybe most graphically expressed within the arts, but creativity is for any field. Okay, next, number 7. I need to empty my mind to be creative. You know, you have all of these philosophies that say empty your mind and let whatever fill your thoughts. That's a very dangerous thing to do. I would not recommend it because when you empty a space, it creates a vacuum that can be filled by anything. When you empty your mind, you're inviting anything and often something dark to come in and fill that space. So I would not recommend that. What I would say is you do need to reflect, daydream, question to be creative. You need to fill your mind with thoughts to be creative because one thought leads to another, and then the next thing you know, you've hit upon some great idea that you can then work out and flesh out and use to create something beautiful or something interesting, something useful. So it's important to reflect, daydream, question. It's important to think to be creative, not empty your mind. Number 8, I need realism to be creative. And I know this may sound odd, but I've seen this a couple times where people think, okay, you put two pieces of art together, and some people would tend to um, favor the art that is more realistic. Like, let's say you have an imaginative piece and a realistic piece. There's some people who believe that the realistic piece is more creative and more truly artistic. And I don't think that's true necessarily. You know, yes, realistic art does take some degree of skill and imagination to produce, but I really believe that something that is purely imaginative is way more creative than something that is realistic. I think sometimes people veer towards what is realistic if they maybe, and forgive me if I'm offending anybody, although, I'm just going to call it like it is. I think sometimes people veer towards what is realistic because it facilitates or it is, how to put it, they veer towards what is realistic because they may be mentally lazy. They just don't want to have to look at something imaginative and try to understand what they're looking at. It's far easier to look at something realistic and say, okay, I see this, I see that, the other, and know that you're going to be perfectly right. So there's also a sense of like maybe confidence, a confidence factor in there where with an imaginative piece, you may be afraid of being wrong. So you prefer something realistic that feels safer, where you know that you're going to be right in your analysis of what you're looking at, right? In your interpretation of what you're looking at. But I do not believe that realism is the highest form of creativity. I think imagination is. I think people have to have, I really need to have an imagination. I really need to have uh graphic imagination, a fanciful imagination, a vivid imagination to be creative. I need to be imaginative to be creative. Number 9, misconception. I need a maze of complex ideas to be creative. Yes, I've seen this quite a bit. Sometimes when people look at my art, for example, which has a minimalist kind of style, people sometimes view it with a kind of condescending kind of attitude, and they're like, "Oh, this is for kids. It's nice, but it's for kids. It's simple kind of thing." And people often mistake simplicity for simplistic. Simple and simplistic are two different things, okay? And honestly, as a creative, and I've been a creative a long time, I really do believe that the essence of creativity is simplicity, not complexity. And very often, people who are into the grandiose, complex things, if you ask them to break things down into the simplest explanation that they can come up with, very often they would be at sea to do that. They would not be able to do that very easily. I really don't think that the essence of creativity is complexity, it's simplicity, right? You need simplicity and clarity of thought to be creative. Yes, you can build more complex things on top of that or around that, but basically, you do need to have a basic, simple understanding of things, a concrete and sensible, logical understanding of things to be creative. Number 10, I need an anything goes mindset to be creative. Anything goes mindset is, for example, the famous one, put a dot in the middle of a canvas and that's creative. No, that's not creative. That's called con artistry. So anything goes is not necessarily creative. To be creative, we need to respect the rules and principles of the field, the craft or the body of knowledge of whatever field that we are pursuing. There are rules and principles that God has embedded within everything that can be categorized, according to the arts, dance, different types of visual art or music. Or on the other side, you may have science, biology, chemistry, math, or architecture, things like that. They all have their own specific rules and principles. And so anything goes really can't fly with creativity. Anything goes is like when somebody says, oh my gosh, this is beautiful. And don't worry about how it looks. I mean, the fact that you created it means that it's beautiful. It's art. Yes, it may be art, but is it good art? You see, people sometimes get a little too sentimental, or they don't want to step on anybody's toes. So they'll be quick to, and these are people who probably know very little about art. They'll be quick to say, oh, that's beautiful. It doesn't matter if nobody understands it. It doesn't matter if it makes sense to you. That's the important thing. No, what you create cannot be just created for you. When God created the universe, He didn't just create it for Himself. So He created it in a way that we can interact with it and understand it and discover it and explore it and benefit from it. And that's how we have to view art as well. If you are the only one who understands the poem you've written, or you're the only one who understands the art that you've created, yes, it may be creative on a certain level, but that's not true creativity. Creativity connects creator with the end user, or with the person who's going to be interacting with what you've produced, right? So anything goes cannot work. If something basically has applied the rules. And yes, rules can be broken, but as I've heard somebody that I know, Jen, I hope she doesn't mind me calling her name, but of Jen, who I met when I was in Japan, who at the time was working for a big card company. I remember her saying, yeah, yes, there are rules. Rules need to be followed. But once you follow the rules, and once you've learned how to apply the rules, you will then know when and how you can break them, right? So you have to generally respect rules and principles, and if you don't, you have to not be respecting them, or not applying them, I should say, for a very good reason. And you have to know what that reason is, right? But anything goes, that very sentimental view of art or creativity, we need to toss that in the garbage can, because it actually doesn't make any sense. It's usually just a cop out. It's a cop out because we sometimes just don't want to make people feel badly and say, you know what you created there looks like pure nonsense. I don't understand what it is. But I don't want to make you feel too badly about it. So I'll just tell you, if you created it, it's still art. If we're to be honest. So that's it. 10. There is a plane flying overhead. So let me just let that plane pass by. They need to make planes with quiet engines. Yeah, by the way, that's another field in which people can be creative, engineering. Yeah, so that's it. 10 quick misconceptions about creativity and 10 counterpoints that tell you what creativity actually is, what it means to be creative. There really is a lot of misunderstanding about what creativity is, and I think it's because we lose so much of our creativity by the time we graduate from high school that we really don't know our head from our foot when we're talking about creativity. So we just come up with things that sound nice, and that sound creative, but we sometimes, a lot of times, don't know what we're talking about. But I can tell you as a creative myself that what I've shared with you here is indeed how creativity works and how it doesn't work. Okay, so I hope this was helpful. If you enjoyed this video, thank you for giving it a thumbs up. And if you would like to see more like it, please subscribe to my channel. It helps with the visibility of my content, and I would really appreciate that. Plus, it's just really nice to know when people appreciate the information that you have shared with them. So if you appreciated this, thank you for giving it a thumbs up. All right, that's it. Until the next video.